Welcome to Dig Deep, the mining podcast. In this podcast, we go deep into mining news, hot topics, and live interviews with mining professionals and leading figures in the mining industry. Introducing your host, Rob Tyson, founder and director of Mining International and Mining International Executive, a leading global mining recruitment and headhunting agency.
Hi mining community, welcome back to another episode of the Dig Deep, the mining podcast. And today's guest is Neil Herbert, who's the executive chair for Atlanta Lithium, who are a lithium-focused exploration and development company advancing its flagship Ewoyaa Project in Ghana, West Africa, to production. Neil is a chartered certified accountant with over 30 years experience in finance and has been involved in growing many mining and oil and gas companies, both as an executive and as an investor for over 25 years. He's also involved in a number of board positions, but as Atlantic Lithium and as a chair with Atlantic Lithium, he's going to give us an overview of the company, talk about obviously their flagship project, what's currently happening in the lithium space, and what ultimately the company wants to achieve. So welcome, Neil, to the podcast. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well. I'm looking forward to we've got a bit of an event coming up next week for our listing on the Ghana Stock Exchange, so I'm just prepping for that. Good.
That's good to hear. So, I wanted to begin to obviously tell us a little bit about your career. Obviously, I'd imagine most of our audience will know you or know of you. So for those that don't, I wonder if you can just tell us a little bit about your career, how you've obviously developed to where you are today, and anything maybe people may not know about yourself as well.
Okay. Thank you, Rob. I'll concentrate on the good stuff then. I originally started out in my professional career working with Pricewaterhouse, but I joined the mining industry in the late 90s, and I joined what was a relatively small mining company at the time, which was a company called Antofagasta. And Antofagasta's main asset was actually a railway historically. So this is one of the great railway companies of the late 19th century. So I think it actually remains as the longest listed company on the exchange. Anyway, the market cap was about 130 million sterling at the time. And we had one small underground copper mine, which was Machia. But we had big ambitions, and fortunately we had a very wealthy family, the Luxic family, backing the group, and we had some very good partners from Japan. And we built a mine called Los Pelambres, and Los Pelambres was a game changer for that company, and it changed it from being 130 million sterling company to I think 20 billion. And I don't think they ever really issued any more shares along the way. It was all very much growth. So we built Pelambres, which was an amazing mine, a low-cost copper mine, which once actually the early 2000s boom kicked off, it had negative cash costs because the molybdenum credit was set off against that. It was just a wonderful project that generated a lot of cash, and a mine that's still going. So we're looking sort of a 30-year mine life. So it continues on to this day. And we also built the Tesoro mine when I was there, which was a very exciting period of growth for the company, tremendous growth, tremendously well-run organization. So following that, I actually I went off to do something a little bit more innovative, and I became the CFO of a company called Branco. And Branco was focused on a project in Esquel in Argentina. And it was, I was told, I don't know, I can't actually confirm it's true, it was actually AIM company number one. And we sold that company. I think it was $368 million in 2002. So we didn't get to build that one, but never mind. And went on from there. So I did work in diamonds in a company that was controlled by BHP Billiton, which we sold to Petra. And then I joined, if you like, an investment house, a company called Galahad Gold. And that company had a number of assets, a number of significant assets, which were focused on sort of development stage, one of which was a uranium company, which was done, I guess, under my watch. And it was a little bit of a challenging story because it wasn't very well set up at the time, and we worked to improve it. But it was one of those miraculous stories in many ways. There was a lot of hard work, and a lot of people contributed to it. And we went from being, I think, a valuation we invested in, I think it was $5 million for 26%. And then 2 years and 2 months later, the company was $2.5 billion and was sold for cash. So that was a very happy day. And then I went on to run another investment company called Polo Resources, and we had a lot of success, paid out a huge amount of money in special dividends from asset acquisitions and sales. So again, that was a very busy period through to about 2013 when the controlling shareholder changed and I left the company. Subsequent to that, I did some more innovative things. So I went into industrial gases. I was a pioneer in industrial gases and was one of the founding members of a company called Ewoyaa, which is listed today in London. And I still work on industrial gas projects. And I have another helium project, which had a very successful well earlier this year, which I'm also chairman of, which is called Pulsar Helium. But in the meantime, back in 2015, I joined the board of a company called Iron Ridge Resources, and at that time was focused on exploration in iron ore, unsurprisingly, in West Africa. That project didn't work out, but over time we looked at other projects. After a couple of years, I was asked to become non-executive chairman, and over time we identified what was an extremely attractive lithium project in Ghana. And very sadly, about 2.25 years ago, the founder of the company died, which was a very sad event for all of us, and also a very traumatic time for the company because he'd been such a dominant character in the running of the company. So I stepped up and became an executive at that point in time. And we've been taking the project through the hurdles towards development since then. So obviously completing the bankable feasibility study, which we completed last year, and indeed all the permitting steps, which we've actively been going through since. So that would be my career in a nutshell. Rob,
yeah.
There you go.
And obviously you've travelled around a lot, and obviously all the projects that you've just mentioned. Is there any ones that stick in your mind as an enjoyable, maybe challenging project? Maybe it's successful. Obviously, you mentioned one of them you turned into a multi-billion-dollar project. But is there any ones that really stick in your mind that you feel you enjoyed? And I suppose got a lot from that project and the process, going through a particular process.
So I think I would highlight more than one. The first one would be Los Palabras, because that was the first project that I ever worked on in the mining industry, and it was a very challenging project because it's a project in the high Andes. A very substantial investment required. I mean, and this is the 90s. It was $1.3 billion. Which today obviously would probably be more like $10 billion of investment. And for a small company to make that transformation, and we really were a small company, to build such a mine was very something in itself. So it was an inspiring start. I suppose the second one would be the story of the uranium company Uramin, which we worked very hard to pull everything together, and we were just extremely fortunate in terms of we looked to sell the company at what was the peak of the uranium market at the time. And so there was enormous value creation very quickly in that respect. So I would say also that project counts. And indeed, finally, last but not least, this project now, and as I always say, this is not the biggest project I've ever worked on, but it is by far, I think, the simplest project in terms of being able to take it to production. It's a very straightforward operation. It's located almost ideally in 110 kilometers from the port along a paved road. Our plant's going to be 800 meters from that road. We have electricity and all the resources we need locally. And Ghana's a great country. We have an enormous depth of experience and education in terms of the personnel in country. So those would be the three that I would pick out from my career, Rob.
Yeah. Right. So let's talk about, obviously, Atlantic Lithium. I just wanted to give us a snapshot of the company, and obviously then we can speak about the project.
Indeed. So Atlantic Lithium is now solely dedicated at this time to the development of its lithium assets in Ghana. And the Ewoyaa discovery itself was It's actually historically these pegmatites were known about from the 1970s. Actually, a Ghana geologist doing her paper for university in the UK in the 1970s made this discovery. For our geologist Len Koff, where we were looking for new projects for Iron Ridge, went out and found this project amongst others. And we started work on it in 2018, and really, it never really looked back on it. It's been very consistent. I want to say it's almost boring in its consistency. As we've done the drilling on the project, we've continually hit more intersections and more resource. We did a scoping study a couple of years ago, and that was based on 20 million tons. We then took the resource up to 30 million tons. We've gone to 35 million tons. We're now most of that into the reserve category, which we can bring into a mine plan. But we continue to make more discoveries, and we've been talking about those the last few weeks in press releases. And we've only touched really a small area of our license area, and we think the potential to keep growing that. And very speculatively, eventually, it could be 2-3 times the size. But our main focus today has switched to actually taking it to production. So we did the studies last year. If you look at the cash costs, which are C1 cash costs are under $400, and the all-in cash costs are under $700. Those are industry-leading numbers, so bottom cash quartile, so up there with some of the best of the Australian projects. It's also all spodumene, which in terms of lithium mineralization is the most desirable. And straightforward mining operation, straightforward processing options because it's all spodumene. We don't need to have more complex than really, which is a relatively straightforward gravity circuit. Obviously, you still need to build a mine. It's 185 million capex, so there's money to be spent. But it's not a big capex requirement for a mine of this profile, and the payback is very quick. And it's the sort of mine that you can see will be running for a very long time. We have an initial mine life of 12 years, but I fully expect us to keep adding resources which will extend that mine life and potentially expand production from what is actually a very significant estimate for production, which is 365,000 tons per annum, which puts us up there as one of the biggest mines, the top dozen biggest spodumene mines in the world.
Obviously, the lithium industry is still immature. How does that, I suppose, present both opportunities and challenges for Atlantic Lithium?
It's a good question because and as people have seen, the price of lithium has defied any estimation by analysts. So analysts have been trying to put the numbers around it, but it's to be expected because the sector is growing so quickly. It really is growing apace. And if you look at some of the numbers in terms of the production of EVs, the estimate growth in the in the number of EVs actually on the road, I think it was like 100 new EV models were proposed at the largest motor show in China. There are 150 battery factories in China alone already. This is an industry that's growing very quickly. So you're looking at 20-30% growth per annum, which is unheard of in our sector. And so the lithium sector was one which was very small. There were relatively small uses if you go back 10 years ago, and it's grown tremendously and it needs to grow a lot more quickly. And as such, the price for lithium has been, I would say, all over the place. So, we've seen spot sales a couple of years ago of $8,000, and then it crashes to $800, and it's currently around $1,200. I think if you say about the threat and the opportunity, that has been a threat to a number of companies that rushed out with production. And we saw this in Australia, is that people rushed a project into production only to find that its costs are so high that it can't possibly run profitably at the current market price. Which comes back to in these circumstances, you really want a project that is grounded there at the bottom end of the price curve, so you can survive any scenario. And Ewoyaa has those characteristics. So if there was another implosion in the price, we'd be one of the last mines to close for sure, because everybody else would go bust before us. Not that I'm expecting that to happen, to be frank. As we sit today, if you look at where we are in terms of what's available in terms of supply and use supply, come 2026, when our plant will come on stream, this will actually be a key period for the industry. And it's very difficult to bring mines on quickly. And I think people find it very hard to get their minds around this. We often talk about it taking 10 years to get a mine to production, but the reality is statistics suggest it's more like 15. If you look at it, given we started work on this in 2018, to bring it to production in 2026 is actually very good going. But, come 2026 and onward, it's going to be increasingly difficult to bring on enough supply quickly enough to meet the growth in demand. And one has to remember, 20% on last year's number is a lot more than 20% on the number 2 years ago. So when we talk about this double-digit growth, it's actually phenomenal in terms of new supply that's required.
Your flagship project, Ewoyaa Project, is one of the obviously largest hard rock lithium projects in the world. What are the key fundamentals of this project that have supported the evolution and valuation of the project to obviously this point? And how do these fundamentals support advancing the project towards construction and then obviously operation?
Yeah, so as I touched on earlier, the project is very fortuitous in that the nature of the mineralization itself is lends to relatively easy processing options, which keeps costs down. The mining, and particularly through the initial years, is relatively low strips. You have relatively low burden that you need to remove because it's taking the top off of a hill. Its situation also works extremely well. As I said earlier, 110 kilometers from a port. That's a marvelous thing. I mean, some of the listeners will probably be aware that Leo Lithium has announced that it's being bought out, I think 400 million or something, just yesterday. And that project is a very good project, but it's situated a long, long way from the port. It's a couple of countries away in Mali. So we are very fortuitous that this project actually sits on the coast. So that's low cost to take it to the port. Mining conditions straightforward, processing options straightforward. We have, as I said before, a great deal of personnel available locally. We have all the infrastructure we need. So that lends to a low capex, low opex project, and it's those characteristics that win through when you have mining projects.
Obviously, you're an ASX-listed lithium company. How are you compared to other obviously lithium peers in WA in Australia? And why do you think investors, maybe from Australia or even Europe or even elsewhere, should consider obviously backing this project in Ghana? And what would you say are some of the key misunderstandings or preconceptions that people have about Africa?
It's a good question. The reality is, in terms of the characteristics of the project, they stack up very well against some of the industry's best. There are a couple of very big projects in Australia which have absolutely phenomenal characteristics that are world leading. We may not be quite as good as that, but we're not far behind. So I think in that respect, technically, we come out very well in that estimation. We're also, in the same way as Australia, Ghana is a mining country. It has over 100 years of mining experience. It has several universities churning out experienced geologists, engineers, etc. for the mining industry, and a great pool of experienced personnel. So you're working with the government and with people who are used to working in the mining industry. So that we have in common with Australia. Respect of Africa, it's a good observation. I mean, the core issue is that investors sometimes find it difficult to discriminate between different African countries. And so obviously Africa is many countries with many different positions in terms of its where they sit in the continent and how stable or unstable they have been. So, I mean, we mentioned Mali earlier. Obviously, that country is currently had a change of regime, and other countries in the West African region have changed. However, Ghana has been a bastion of stability, really. So it was the first African country to obtain independence in the 1950s, I believe that was. And have had a number of changes of government without problems of violence, and very stable, a prosperous nation, lots of mining experience. And so Sits very well in terms of any risk index that you see. So in that respect, it does come out very well. But the main challenge is, I think, is perceptions for investors. They tar everything with the same brush, as it were. So experiences that they may have had in other African countries that may have put them off may unnecessarily impact their opinions of Ghana.
Obviously, China continues to dominate the lithium industry. How long do you expect that to obviously continue? And obviously through its listings and partnerships with Atlantic Lithium, obviously has ties with Africa, Europe, Australia and North America. How do you see these jurisdictions playing out and obviously with their part within the lithium industry in obviously the forthcoming years and decades to come?
So as it stands today, it's fair to say that China is well ahead of everybody else, and Chinese companies are pioneers in battery technology, chemical conversion for batteries, and indeed increasingly in EVs themselves. So at this point in time, there is a dominance of China. However, the West is also seeking to catch up. Obviously, we have a partnership with a US company that was looking to take product to the US to put into a chemical conversion plant there, which feed into battery technology. We remain, to be honest, agnostic as to who we work with. Obviously, we want to work with industry leaders. We have an offtake process at this point in time, and the purpose of the offtake is effectively to provide funding for the project build. That project has gone very well. We've had participants from all over the world, but perhaps unsurprisingly, the most competitive interests have been from China. And we don't have an issue with that. At the end of the day, we believe that the transition to EVs is a good thing for everybody over time. And so working with leading partners in that industry, if they are from China, then so be it. We will work with Chinese companies. We don't, it's everybody is welcome in terms of doing business. We don't have a political outlook, as it were, as to who we should and shouldn't do business with. But yes, I mean, we have seen, and over the last couple of years, increasing interest, particularly from Europe, as Europe seeks to catch up with what's this changing technology. So we hope that as time goes on, that those parties will be more competitive in process in terms of buying product.
Obviously, you recently became the first lithium company to list on the Ghana Stock Exchange. Just wondering if you can just explain to us, obviously, the logic behind the listing and how it fits in with the company. And obviously aiming to achieve in terms of maximising the value generated by the project for Ghana.
Yes. So as we stand today, we have several ways in which Ghana, if you like, is participating in the project and what we are doing, and we see ourselves very much as a Ghana-led institution in many ways. All our staff in country, all our management in country are Ghanaian. We have completed the first stage and about to complete the second stage of an investment from the Sovereign Wealth Fund. So they've invested into Atlantic Lithium, and now they're investing into the project itself. The government itself has a 13% stake in the project. And finally, what we're seeking to do is give the opportunity for Ghanaians to be able to invest into the company itself through the Ghana Stock Exchange, which the government of Ghana and indeed the Sovereign Wealth Fund, everyone is promoting this as the stock exchange as a new way for investors to access companies in Ghana and be able to invest in them. So we're very keen. Our first day of trading should be Monday next week. I'm expecting a slow start, but over time, expect it to grow. There are significant investors. There are funds in Ghana who invest into the mining industry, and individuals as well who invest into the mining industry. So we hope over time that we'll get that interest. And finally, this was a commitment we made to the government, because this is one of their initiatives in terms of building Ghana to get more companies onto the exchange sooner. And so we're very pleased to complete this. We agreed it with the Ghana government at the end of October last year, and here we are in the month of May actually completing that listing. So it's an important thing in completing our obligations to Ghana.
Obviously, the listing forms a number of catalysts that the company has ahead of it during this obviously immensely important year. Can you outline some of these for us?
Yes, so it's actually now we're entering into a very intensely busy period for the company. So obviously the Ghana Stock Exchange listing, which we will complete next week. Following that, I do expect, as I mentioned earlier, the investment, substantial investment by the Ghana Sovereign Wealth Fund, MIF, for $28 million into the project. We expect that to be done again in the course of this quarter of the year. The government has a ratification process for our mining lease. There's a number of mining leases that need to be approved, so that should go through Parliament around the end of this quarter. We also have, and very importantly for us, an offtake process that will be running for some months now, and those parties are coming forward effectively to provide finance for the project. And at the same time, you also know where we're sending the project to and what price we'll be obtaining for the pricing mechanisms for that product. So all that should come together as well by mid-year. So those steps are very important. They expect to complete all the remaining permitting steps. We've recently completed the final stage of consultation on environmental matters locally in country, and so we expect to get that environmental approval as well around the middle of the year. And hopefully all the remaining permitting steps will be completed in the third quarter of the year, such that we can cut the sod, as they say in Ghana, and we can actually, start breaking ground on the project and moving forward with the project, so that we can move into the construction phase next year and bring the plant to production in 2026 as planned.
And lastly, what's the outlook for the company, and I suppose some of the big ambitions for Atlantic Lithium? And are you open to sort of looking at some projects outside of Ghana or even outside of Africa?
Oh, it's a good question. We all have ambition. So, I mean, the first and the priority overwhelmingly is obviously to bring the Ewoyaa mine to production as planned. But in parallel to that, and as I said earlier, we have scraped a tiny corner of our license package in Ghana, and we know that there are more pegmatites, which are the mineral-bearing rock which we're looking to exploit. So in that, we think there's good opportunity within our license area, which is our focus number one. Within Ghana itself, we're out there looking at other areas where we think there's good potential. So looking to see if we can expand our footprint in Ghana itself. And as you say, we've been looking further afield, particularly in Africa, but even beyond Africa, we will look at projects that we think have opportunity, things that we think may have the opportunity that Ewoyaa provided us. So that characteristics that look low cost operations, things that are going to be low operating costs, that've got that characteristic, straightforward exploitation, spodumene projects. So yes, we're very excited about the future. We think we've got a lot of potential in our license area first, second in other areas in Ghana where we may be able to expand. But we do believe there's a wider opportunity, in particular in Africa, where you can bring projects, as I pointed out earlier, to production relatively quickly. So again, 8 years to bring Ewoyaa to production. That may sound like a long time, but in our business, usually it takes 15 years, and you're lucky if you get there. So there you go.
Yeah. Neil, really appreciate your time. Thank you for obviously giving us an overview, an update on Atlantic Lithium, and obviously wish you well in the future. If our audience wants to reach out to you, if they want to follow the story and obviously receive any news alerts, how can they go about doing that? What social media platform channels are you on?
We are very active on social media. We're on X. You can follow us on X. But we do try and interact as much as possible with shareholders and give them the opportunity to ask questions and what have you. So we try to do our best to attend events and arrange online platforms so people can ask questions on those. But also, like this session here is the opportunity to talk about the project, and so people get information. But yes, you can sign up on our website to receive our news flow. We are on X. We're probably on other social media channels that I don't use because I'm not exactly the most au fait with social media channels.
Yeah, we'll include those in the show notes anyway, so people can have easy access to your content as well. So obviously wish you all the best. Perhaps you can come on next year and give us an update on how things have gone, and obviously good luck with the listing as well.
Thanks very much, Rob. Look forward to that.
Nice, thank you. Hope you enjoyed this episode. As always, appreciate your continued support. Please keep sharing these episodes far and wide, all across the world. And obviously, we want to educate our mining industry. And we, like I always say, I really appreciate your help, and please keep sharing these episodes. So until next time, happy mining.
Thank you for listening. Remember to reach out to Rob via the show notes and be sure to subscribe and leave a review. Until next time, happy mining, helping each other to improve the mining industry.